Hello, good morning, everybody. Today we have a special guest with us, Arushi Chopra. Arushi Chopra just passed out from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, where she did her 5 years of Bachelor's of Architecture. Arushi Chopra is an architecture student, not anymore, a writer, artist, graphic designer, illustrator, and entrepreneur. She's dealt with the editorial work of the college magazine. She studied journalism from the National School of Journalism. She was the editor at the NASA, which is the National Architecture Student Association, which in the Executive Student Council, which is the main council for NASA all over India. She's interned at Build Sense, North Carolina, USA. She's volunteered under socially useful, productive work at the Vidya Shilp Academy, and she's done an amazing piece of thesis. And that thesis is not, it's very special. It's very emotional because it is doing something for persons with disability. It's doing something for people for whom people would not normally think so much that they would need hospitality. People would just simply think, oh, uh, just the basic necessities may be enough, but she's gone far ahead and she's gone in making sure that people with dementia have a place to be in, like a hospitality place, a retreat, etc. But I've said a lot, so welcome, Arushi. Please introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thank you so much for having me. So I don't think there's anything more I can add on to my introduction. Um
How has
yeah.
college been for you? 5 years.
Oh, it's been a very wholesome 5 years. Definitely can say all of it summed up in my thesis. I mean, from whatever skills I picked up starting first year, fifth year, I had to use all of them.
So great. And
Yeah.
your thesis, how important is thesis for a student's life? You can just tell us about that. And
So a thesis,
yeah,
in terms of the semester breakdown, I think a thesis holds about 25% of the entire student's grade throughout the 5 years. Obviously, we all know this. Anyone entering architecture needs to complete a thesis before they're awarded a degree. It is one of the mandatory prerequisites. An entire semester is devoted to the thesis, which outlines how important it is for a student.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great. So, your thesis, tell us about your thesis. Tell us about what is your thesis topic? Repeat it for our viewers, and say why you chose this topic. Why is it special? Why is it close to your heart? Tell us about that.
So the project that I picked was a dementia care and respite retreat. This is a concept which is essentially foreign to India, because in India, when we think of dementia care, we think of institutions with small rooms with a lot of caretakers running around people, where people are basically treated like they're not in their senses anymore, which makes sense. But people with dementia also have this urge of wanting to be heard, wanting to be a normal person. They want to have their independence, and it irks them when people are treating them like small children. The reason why I picked this topic was because I wanted to do something that was
Pause, pause,
relatable to
pause,
me.
pause,
Yeah.
pause, pause. Tell us about what dementia is, because there are a lot of viewers who might not know what dementia is. So just give a little bit of
Right.
introduction.
Okay. So dementia is a illness. It's a mental illness which is diagnosed by symptoms, primarily forgetfulness. So your brain loses cognitive function, which means you forget people around you. You forget how to perform daily activities that you once were able to do. Gradually this disease has no cure. Gradually, it comes to a point where a person forgets to eat, forgets to swallow, etc. So, the only thing a person can do currently when they're diagnosed with dementia is to manage the symptoms of the disease. Um, this could involve just care at home, this could involve care at an institution. It all depends on the extent of the disease and what the family chooses to do, whether they're able to provide care or not. In India, what the current scenario is that the people who are diagnosed with dementia, their family members choose to provide the care. And in my family, my grandfather had dementia, which is where this idea basically came from. So I wanted to do something in my thesis which was more than just a commercial center, more than something that would be used for commercial purposes. And when I proposed a wellness retreat to my guide, he said, "Why don't you put a pagal khana on the beach?" Which led me to think that I could pick something that was closer to what I wanted to do. And I was just thinking of scenarios in my head. I wanted to link it to neuroscience, which is where my interest lies. And dementia came to mind, which my grandfather had dementia, and my mother was the caretaker. So I saw the toll that the disease took on the entire family, on my grandfather, on my mother. And right now we have options of respite care across the world. So there is a company in Canada, Ontario, Canada, which has a center which is specifically for respite care. So you the idea of respite is to provide relief to the caregiver, which basically means if my family member has dementia, but I'm feeling very burnt out, or if I have to undergo surgery, I am not able to take care of my family member, I can leave them in care of a respite center, which will provide him the care that they need and provide me the relief that I need. And this creates a healthy environment for both parties to manage the disease, to navigate through it.
Do they take good
This
care
is where
there?
it came.
Do they take good care?
Yes, yes. It is the same level of care that one would get at a dementia care institution, except it can be short term in this sense. And in this sense, the caregiver can also be taught how to take care efficiently to avoid burning themselves out.
But Indians have this culture of taking care of their own people rather than
Yes.
sending them somewhere else. So would you have the same emotional connect somewhere else? I'm just trying to get that also from you.
Yes, so that obviously is a very valid concern, which is why I chose the site of Goa. So the idea here was that you could Goa is a place where tourists come from across the country, across the world. So the idea is that the family could bring their person with dementia for a vacation here, and the person with dementia would be receiving care while also being able to enjoy with their family members. So essentially, they're given a arrangement while their family is still close by. Some people might opt for a longer term of care, which is an option provided even with my project. But if there's a short term care, then the family can be nearby. The family can meet up with this person. They can all enjoy the beach together. They can enjoy Goa together. So it creates a very wholesome experience for the person with dementia and their whole family.
Very nice, very nice. So now just jump directly into the architecture solution, the manifestation of all the good thoughts that you have into brick and mortar, how you have converted all that you have thought of into a real building project in Goa. So you please tell us about where the site is and how you have done, and maybe you could share some of the work on with our audience. So go ahead.
Yes. So the site is in Arusim, Goa. Um, the site is on the beach itself. So one of the access points to the site is from the beach. When you're designing for a person with dementia, it is very important that their safety is taken care of, which means they have a tendency to wander to different places. They have a tendency to explore their surroundings because they forget it. So similar to how you would have um, a person that's introduced into a new environment, they have that tendency to go and find out things for themselves, even if they might be experiencing it for the thousandth time. It's still new to them. So um, while designing for people with dementia, you have to take care of their wandering and orienting them in the correct way. So despite the fact that they wander, they still need to be able to identify zones where they know that there's certain functions are being performed. So they need to be able to identify where they're going to sleep, where they're going to eat, where they're going to meet other people. Um, so what did with the site, as you can see, there are a few trees that are existing on the site. So my idea was to keep these trees and use them to divide the site into zones, which are creating natural barriers. As a part of our site study, we were required to find out the development zones, the regulations that we would be required to follow. So As you can see, there is a line that cuts through my site, which is the 200 meters from high tide line zone. And what this basically means is that the area to the left of this line is um, within the area that can be flooded if in case of any natural unforeseen circumstance. So this area is a non-development zone, which means I cannot have any permanent structure in this zone. So half of my site almost gets barred off by this, which is a boon in a way, since it leaves a specific zone for me to provide landscaping, sensory landscaping, which can include gardens, it can include um, herb patches and such. So the rest of the area within
So
the
yeah,
coastal
so
regu-
for our viewers, this is
Mhm.
CRZ regulation. That is a coastal regulation zone regulation, and that's across all the coast. This is something that, in the National Green Tribunal, we have cases every other day, and people who do not follow or who violate this, they have to be facing a judge. So it's very, very important to understand that CRZ is important. It regulates the flora, fauna, environment, ecosystem of the coastal area. So it's not only disaster, it's also the flora fauna, the sensitive flora fauna of that area, which has to be preserved. So carry on, Arushi, and tell me if you agree
Yes.
with me.
Yes, I completely agree. This is all stuff that you have to understand before picking a site that is on the coast. You need to understand if your site is too small, then majority of it will be in the non-development zone, and then you're left with constructing nothing but temporary structures.
Right.
So in the coastal regulation zone beyond 200 meters from high tide line, the area from 200 meters to 500 meters from high tide line is areas where the construction is so regulated that the maximum height limit is 9 meters, which means that after constructing a plinth, your building can be only 9 meters tall. So in my case, this wasn't an issue, since I was proposing an idea which were to be a retreat, so the buildings could be scattered to create separate zones very nicely. um, so the most that you can construct here is G+1. Uh, so, as a part of site study, I panned out the utilities that were available to me on site, just to have an idea of how I could provide connectivity to the site. So there is one road that goes along the site from where I can provide the only access to my site, which helps me maintain the security and safety of the people on site. There is one drain that runs along the site, which acts as the runoff drain um, in the monsoon seasons. So if you can see here in this map, the blue is where the predicted water runoff is from. So there is a drain that's been created, which I photographed during site visits. There is a temporary electricity line that goes through the site, which would need to be relocated if this was to be constructed. There is road connectivity on either side. However, this is the main road is the Arasim Beach Road, which is from where I will have the access to the site. Um, I planned out the trees and plants that were on site. This is the coconut tree. Obviously, there are other local trees that are on site, which again provide a wonderful experience for those that are visiting. For example, if there's a mango tree, um, picking mangoes can be reminiscent of the past of the people with dementia. I mean, all of us have heard stories of our grandparents telling us they would pick fruits from trees. Even if they don't climb the trees, they would still be able to have those fruits, which would again take them back to their old time. Um, these are some more pictures of the site. So as you can see, the site is slightly elevated from the beach, which protects it in case of really high tides, or in case the water has gone beyond what it usually is, but it doesn't completely save us there. So there are views from around the site. There is a climate study that I had conducted to get an idea. And this is important because I am designing for people that are primarily going to be above 50 to 60 years of age. In India, we've heard our elders say that it's so cold, our joints are stiff. Goa provides a climate which is so comfortable for people with such problems. Um, The most that they have to worry about is humidity, which can be tackled with a lot of passive ways. So, because the weather is not cold at all, because it's so pleasant all year round, it attracts tourists all year round. It creates a comfortable environment for people to live in. So, this was the psychrometric chart that was pulled from Climate Consultant to again analyze the climate further, and sun
So
shading chart
for
is
our viewers, tell us a little bit about psychometric chart, and if you just can go back. So little bit about it.
right. So, as you can see here, when you refer to all of these strategies, they provide you comfort in terms of they provide you information regarding comfort that you can provide with sun shading, with controlling the thermal mass, with direct evaporative cooling. So, each of these colors has um, has a significance in this legend over here.
So,
So, when you're
yeah, Arushi, just look at this. This is so
yeah,
important, a lesson for us. You know, even without air conditioning, 31.4% can be achieved by simply shading the windows. And that's the
exactly.
importance of having chhajjas or sunshades in our windows. Would you agree with me on that?
Completely. And then the remaining 64% can be by cooling, adding dehumidification, which ventilation plays a huge role when thinking of passive strategies.
Right. Thank you.
So, yeah. Moving on, this was the sun shading chart because, as you just mentioned, providing shade is so important. And this is for December to June, which is the winter, spring, and then June to December, which is the summer and fall. So there is very minimal difference in both of the charts, but this helps understand how the sun shading needs to be provided in order to provide comfort in all the months of the year, so
This looks
throughout the year.
like, this looks like somebody's pelvic area. Can you explain what's happening here?
Okay, so this chart over here,
Yeah,
the bearing, the x-axis of the chart shows the bearing angle, and the
yes.
y-axis shows the altitude angle of the sun. So over here we have timings of the day. So as you can see, at noon it is very hot. So if you refer to the legend, warm slash hot means greater than 27 degrees Celsius, which we can all agree with. So at noon it's going to be very hot. Earlier in the morning it's comfort, which means greater than 20 degrees Celsius. So this zone is when the temperature of day is most comfortable. And as you can see, cool cold, there is no indication of cool or cold, which means that we will be comfortable providing shade to the buildings all year round.
Wow.
um, yeah.
Great. So this is also available from Climate Consultant. All our viewers can
Yes.
just look into Climate Consultant, put the weather file
Yes.
of the city, and then you can get the access to the same weather, sun charts and the psychrometric chart for their own cities. Thank you.
Exactly. Yes. Climate consultant is a very helpful tool for students. I mean, for example, these are the design guidelines that were provided from climate consultant for the particular climate that I have. So if you just skim through this, you will be able to see using light colored building materials and cool roofs, minimize conducted heat gain. Um, High efficiency air conditioner or heat pump should provide cost effective in this climate. Such ideas are given to us from climate consultant. These are a few guidelines that we can adapt to when designing. So natural ventilation, screen porches and patios, all of that is just adding is just providing you the information that you already know and that you can then use for your design.
Brilliant.
Yes. So these again touching upon the bylaws and building codes. These are the coastal zones in Goa, and according to these zones, um, the building that I have lies under CRZ 3A. So this all depends on your site. Based on where your site lies, the zone varies, and according to the zones, the construction regulations also vary. So when starting off with a site, it's very important to look at these to analyze how much you would be able to construct and what regulations you have to adhere to.
And for all the viewers, architects are so much lawyers. We have to go through so many regulations, and every time we sign on a drawing, we're signing on a legal document. So we have to make sure that we have to look at all the law of the land, including, for example, in such areas, most people would not know that they cannot build close to the sea. And that is something that is news for a lot of people, that there is CRZ. And for people who take having nice villas on the sea for granted, it's not anymore. You can only build huts there, and your house would be far away from the sea. So go on. Thank you.
Yes. Um, so these are a few more details that I went to while finding out the zoning, the bylaws, the regulations. I drew a few sketches to highlight the same. So, for example, areas excluded from the FAR, the atrium, the balconies. Um, Areas included in the FAR are non-service areas. Uh, so all of this is stuff that one needs to consider before designing, because you can't put a balcony there and be like, oh, I considered this a part of my FAR. Now what do I do? Because then that resets your whole design scheme. That sends you back to point zero, where you have to rethink everything and come back with a new approach.
And you know
So
what? Just what you said, that you can have to think before designing, and the worst part is you have to think it before construction. So
agreed,
so
yes.
because it's like a physician can bury their mistake, but an architect cannot.
Absolutely not.
It's going to be there staring at us all our life.
Yep, for everyone to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Go
Yeah.
on.
Yes. So again, all of these are just a few of the different aspects that I considered. Depending on a site, it could vary. It could be more, it could be less. Um, so the maximum ground coverage that I had was 33% after the high tide line. So this is in the zone which is 200 meters to 500 meters between high tide line. So these were a few graphics that I used to infer from the site. So the built open relationship of the area around my site. It is the site is basically located in what they call a village in Goa, Arushi village. And as you can see, the buildings are so sparse from each other. The only cluster that one can see is close to where the railway station is for Cansolim. The larger cluster here just refers to another resort which is in the vicinity. Solar path and wind direction, again, an important aspect to study before designing, because that governs where your sunshades are going to be, where your openings are going to be, how you're providing ventilation. If you put two buildings that are in the wind path, that could create a high pressure zone, and then there would just be a wind tunnel, so everybody would just be blown away. All of that needs to be taken care of while designing. So
You know
elements
what?
around the
You know what? The channel's logo, the Built's logo, is all
yeah,
about those two elements. It has a sun,
yeah, I
and
noticed.
it has a wind
Yes, yes,
passing through it. Go ahead.
yes. So elements around the site again are important, not only for people with dementia, but also for all other people. When you're thinking of someone who has dementia, you need to understand that they might be overloaded with sensory stimulations. So, providing a peaceful environment where their sensory stimulations can be controlled is very helpful in them regulating their own emotions. So, for example, if you put a person with dementia in a very noisy place, they will be very disoriented. They won't be able to find their way around. They will get very upset because they're getting so confused. So, for this site, the only main source of noise is the railway track, which is when I visited the site, it was not even an issue because there was so many trees around, there was such quiet around, and when you could hear the waves, you couldn't hear the train at all. Um, Again, this is very important. Conducting a site visit is so mandatory. Some people just design buildings from sitting in their office, and it doesn't fit on the site then. Um, then
People
the
say
views
that
for
people say that very romantically. You have to understand the site context. You have to understand what the site is telling you. But on a very practical basis, there are so many things which, uh, even reports by somebody who's visited the site cannot make, because you have to see the people around at the most minimum. You have to see the location, the how the views would be around, how
yeah,
the surrounding building is going to block your sun, how the surrounding building is going to block your wind, how the how what is the texture of the rock, what is the texture of the vegetation? All these things, a designer, it's best if the designer goes and sees and touches and feels the site. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds very romantic and illogical to be saying this, but the site speaks to you.
Absolutely. That's where we started. Absolutely, it does speak to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, the views that we mapped out on the site were in these four directions, which were for the forest area, the beach itself, and the palm plantations. But when I visited the site, it was pretty obvious that the palm trees were so thick and there was such dense vegetation around that it didn't make sense for me to try to get a view of the sea. Um, I did, however, anchor my buildings towards the sea since it created a sense of direction for the buildings and for the people around. So again, if I hadn't gone to site, I would have designed with the idea, oh, I can see the sea from where I'm standing. But in reality, I wouldn't have been able to do that because my buildings aren't tall enough.
Got it.
Um, Permeability is a concept which is related to more than just what is happening directly on the site. So, panning out different radii of activities around your site, you can get an idea of what is accessible to you, what is not, how permeable your site is essentially. So, when I'm coming from, say, the airport, how permeable is the site to me then? How accessible is it for me? What do I need to go through to get to the site? So, because we're considering people with dementia, I have taken only the immediate surroundings, so a 500-meter and a 1 kilometer radius, which should cater to the people on the site here.
Got it.
Um, I also did a terrain analysis to get an idea of how the slope was, and each of these lines highlights a contour. This is information from Google Earth that has been translated into a graphic. So as you can see, there are not a lot of contours here. The site is not very steep,
For our
not very steep.
viewers, contour is the representation of the heights or the height of the site, which are also, so it's an isoline, which means all the places on your site which have the same elevation or height will be marked by the same contour line. So whenever you see a lot of lines stuck together, that means it's a very high place when there's a very steep slope. And when you see lines very far spaced, wide spaced, that means it's a very low slope. Is that right, Arushi?
Yes, yes, that's correct. Exactly. So because this area, the site is located in, is currently used as an agricultural land, um, the site and its surroundings are almost flat. So the slope is very gradual, which is an advantage, which means that I don't need to navigate slopes with old people or try to figure out how I'm going to put the roads. It gives me a lot of leverage. But it also becomes difficult in the sense of providing interactive elements or views for the people in different buildings. Um, so I will just pause here for a second to move to a part of my research. Apart from conducting site studies, another important aspect was conducting case studies. So, because in India, respite care is not a new topic, um, I considered buildings that were catering to similar problems. So, for example, there is Karunashraya, which is in Bangalore. It is a hospice center. It takes care of people, cancer patients mostly, who do not have long to live. But this center gives them and allows them to feel like their life has some meaning, which is why I took it as a case study. So, um, if you see, the context of this building is so
Just one line.
cluttered.
That's also called palliative care. That is
Yes,
the care,
palliative care.
palliative care given people who are at the terminal stage of their life. But just to make their life more relevant, you give them at least the peace of mind so
Yeah.
that they can, have a good time at that time. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry to disturb you.
Yes, yes. No problem. And another thing with this area is that people feel like they're surrounded by their peers, so they don't feel like they're a burden on anyone. They feel like they have friends, they have a community, they have a family there. Um, Similarly, there's Alzheimer's Village, which is, as the name suggests, an Alzheimer care facility. which I chose because of the planning and the design of the facility and their philosophy. Um, so this incorporates the nature around it as a part of the village itself. So it creates a village like community for the people with Alzheimer, which is a very interesting approach that I wanted to reflect in my design as well. There is Lingdal Healthcare Center, which is a healthcare center for not just dementia, but it has it splits different functions into different wings. The zoning is so efficient there that one cannot get lost. There is one central atrium, there is color coding, there is a central staircase that goes in the atrium, and each wing is denoted by a different color. So the orientation and wayfinding that has been taken care of there is immaculate. Um, as case examples, which is because I couldn't study the building as such, but the idea and the concepts that had been included in these buildings was important. There is Memory and Company, which is the care facility in Canada which provides dementia respite care. And then there is Nima Elder Care, which is in Gurgaon, which again provides respite care. And I was able to get an interview with the architect of Nima, um, architect Sanjeev Kumar, and he was able to guide me quite a lot in terms of designing for dementia. So I would highly suggest that anyone doing a thesis get in touch with someone that has done similar projects before, because that gives you a real world perspective of how it is. So, for example, Sir told me that while we think of people with dementia needing a lot of care, they really don't. They want themselves to sit with their friends and play games. They want to sit with their peers and enjoy the sunshine in the winters. So, um, similar ideas Sir was able to convey to
A
me.
big shout out for Sanjeev Kumar Jain for guiding Arushi and for doing such great work for the elderly and for people who need palliative care.
Yeah. Um, so creating a matrix of all the case studies I studied allowed me to look at them at one glance and see everything that I needed to know. So I listed out everything from the image, the location, the area of the project, why I selected it, what programs and facilities they offered, to the building materials and the experience that they offered. So, as you can see here, I highlighted key features of the design for each of the buildings, and then I highlighted the building materials for those that I did case studies for. And in terms of materiality, I put images that summed up how the experience felt in one or two glances. And then in experience, I use icons to understand at a glance what experience they're trying to show and what I wanted to reflect.
The stable form is the best way of presenting because it shows you an immediate comparison. And I think that's
Agree.
something that for at least even for example, what is the size of a particular space? I've seen area charts like that where there's like,
Yeah,
okay, case study one, case study two, case study three, internet study and all those, and then standards. And then you have different areas, and then you select one and you give your logical explanation as to why you chose that. I think that's
yeah,
also, something that a lot of people do, and that's something that everybody should do so that you have the right area for the right space.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so, as a part of my research, because I picked up a topic like dementia, there was a lot of research that I had to conduct to understand what dementia is and everything that I would need to design for dementia. So, this is what my research framework looked like. I highlighted 8 particular areas of research, from understanding the disease, the stigma, caregiver burden, respite care, sensory stimulation with dementia, human centric design, spatial perception and needs, and then using the findings to do my design. So, highlighting the key areas of my design of my research, A, helped me understand exactly what points I needed to touch upon before I design, and B, helped me limit what I was doing, because at one point I was reading research papers and books with no stop to where I wanted to write down what I understood and everything. So it got very excessive to the point where I wasn't even thinking of design anymore. I was just so engrossed in the details of understanding what I was researching. Um, so highlighting what you're going to research is definitely helpful for both ways to know where to stop and where to start. Um, this then led me to understand the technology and materiality that I would need to use for my design. So, for example, because of the location of my site, the soil is saline. I would have to use brace spear foundations, which are basically pile foundations. Then composite structure, so using varied materials, including RCC, brick masonry, some timber, using vernacular materials and the hip roof system because Goa is a very rainy place. So if I provide a flat roof, that's going to cause waterlogging. That's going to lead to more issues while building. Um, Similarly, there's green systems. There are sustainable systems that I wanted to implement, such as the rainwater harvesting, the photovoltaic system. Um, Using the building envelope efficiently and providing shading. Um, and then, of course, there is assistive technology and using technology for therapy. So, because this is a center where care still needs to be provided for dementia patients, despite the vacation like experience that we're providing them, um, using using technology for providing them therapy in terms of occupational therapy or just mental health is a quite efficient way of going. It is something that is coming up. So again, as the architect from Nima had told me, they use systems like drop sensors. So for example, if someone falls down, if they've dropped to the ground, they have a sensor that they wear around their neck. They can use that to call for help, or similar facilities that just allow caregivers to be there for the person that requires care without being all up in their space. um, so I made another table. As you said, making tables is the best way of understanding information. So this is for the types of dementia, which helped me understand the symptoms of each type of dementia that I needed to cater to. So from the mild stage to the severe stage, the symptoms vary, and for each type of dementia, they vary further. Um, so, understanding the signs of dementia help people understand when their family member or when they need to approach a professional for help. So, it can be anything from withdrawal from work or social activities to actual disorientation of time and place. Um, Usually, people with dementia don't get diagnosed until the age of 40, until the age of 60. If it's within the age of 40 to 60, it's known as early onset dementia. Um, when I created a space for dementia, I didn't want to limit it to the type of dementia. So I didn't pick Alzheimer's, or I didn't pick um, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, for example. So again, understanding all of the stages of dementia and the signs and symptoms of dementia creates more guidelines for me to know where I can design from. Um, so this is again just understanding the impact of dementia on the brain. So this is a normal human brain in this picture. This is Lewy body dementia. So as you can see, the brain is deteriorating. This is Alzheimer's disease, and this is FTD. I forget the full form, but it's also a type of dementia. So mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease are entirely different, and I need to be able to cater to both of these when I'm designing for dementia. Um, so, activities of daily living are one of the most important things that one should consider when designing. For a normal person, an activity of daily living is an essential routine task that one can perform without any help. So, this can be anything from simply getting up from your place and walking to communicating to another person, or managing your own medication, for example. People with dementia require assistance with this because they're losing their cognition, they're losing their cognitive thinking abilities are impaired, their brains are not working at how they used to, they're not 100%. So from basic activities of daily living to instrumental ones, which are like combinations of um, different activities, they do require help, but they don't want someone else to do it for them. So this is again just creating a chart of different activities for dementia patients. uh, from waking up to grooming themselves, getting bathed, etc., doing relaxation exercises, cognitive exercises, doing creative activities, all the way from therapy, outdoor activities to their bedtime, where they do their own routine, they get themselves into bed, they go to sleep. Um, so these are all activities that I use to create my area program. So I need to cater to all of these activities, plus make sure that there is a provision where a caregiver can come and help them. Um, in India, there is a large stigma against dementia where people call it bhulne ki bimari, or which is a very menial way of saying it. People mistake dementia to just be a sign of aging, that it's very normal, but it's not. It's a disease which takes so many lives every year. Um, any person living with dementia is likely to encounter stigma. So, one of the main reasons that I decided to create a retreat for dementia patients was to get rid of this stigma, to create a experience for people with dementia, which would put them on the map and say these are normal people too. They can have normal experiences too. And their care does not need to be limited to prison like rooms in tiny institutions where they're just surrounded by a swarm of caregivers. Um, they didn't choose to have the illness, and they don't deserve to be stigmatized by the society. So just saying ki oh inko bhulne ki bimari hai doesn't make sense to involve them in such in such scenarios. It doesn't make sense at all. For example, my neighbor also has Alzheimer's disease, and her family makes sure to include her in every function possible. So, for example, even if it's lighting a bonfire for Lodi, she will be there. She will be performing rituals and customs as the normal ladies of the family do. Um, it is very easy for false beliefs about dementia to spread. So, providing architecture has a very important role um, where they can create buildings which are more than just normal rectangular blocks, to show others that this is what dementia patients require. They require more than just a small room. They can do so much more if their needs are taken care of, if wayfinding and orientation is taken care of in a building. um, so again, learning reduce how stigma can be reduced. There are a few ways that that can be taken care of, which is all a part of research that led to the actual design. um, Caregiver burden is important to understand where respite care comes in. So caregivers do get burnt out. It's just a matter of when, and whether they're able to get themselves the right care when they do get burnt out. So sometimes caregivers resort to substance abuse. Sometimes they isolate themselves, which is then harmful to themselves as well as the person they're taking care of. So, providing respite care allows them to take a break so that they don't get burnt out. Or when they realize that they are getting burnt out, they're able to step back, take some time for themselves while the person that they're caring for is still receiving care. So, that worry is no longer in their mind, because that person is still in good hands, just not your hands. Um, and then gradually they can pick up the responsibilities again. So I conducted a research, and I also highlighted the percentages of the caregivers that are that undergo caregiver burden. 60% of caregivers are women. 27% caregivers report health decline. Some of them in medical are involved in medical or in healthcare. So majority of the family members taking care of a person are a spouse or children, which of course you love your family member, but sometimes you need to take a break to be able to love them. As they say, distance makes the heart grow fonder. Um, this led to understanding respite care and overcoming the obstacles for them. So we do believe that loving one means caring one. This is a very common concept in India, but there needs to be a healthy boundary there too, or else it interferes with the care. So, thinking about it practically is also very important. So, maintaining one's hobbies, rekindling interests, leads to a caregiver feeling more like themselves and less like just a caregiver. So, dementia affects the five senses primarily, and this was the approach that I took to designing for my thesis. So, using the five senses and in their entirety. So, dementia starts from affecting one sense, the vision, and then it moves on to affecting all others. But um, keeping their senses stimulated helps them to retain their senses longer, which is again something I picked up from studying so many research papers. So I highlighted how I could design for all five senses. So, for example, if I'm doing sight, I need to design with contrasting colors. I can't be using patterns which have lots of black spots in between, because then they feel like they're falling into a hole. It helps keep the brain active. For hearing, they require calm and quiet. Overlapping noises cause issues for them, it disorients them. For smell, again, unique aromas of each space help them identify. So, for example, in a dining room, they would be able to smell food and they would know this is where I need to be for eating. Or if they're in a garden, they're smelling herbs around them. They know this is where they're just strolling, they're taking a walk. Similarly, um, touch is also very important. Using textures, they, as we know, elderly people have a habit of grabbing onto things to support themselves. So having a wall with a different texture that varies throughout helps them understand openings, help them understand where they need to enter a space or exit a space. um, Taste is something that one doesn't think of, but designing an environment for taste is also quite important. So, for example, in a space with a kitchen or a dining area, people associate that space with the tastes that they feel, the food that they eat. Um, People with dementia also get confused by the food that they eat. So, designing a space where they know that they have to eat here encourages them to take part in eating more. So if you put them in a little bedroom and then give their meals to them in their bed, that is not going to work for them, because to them this is the space where they sleep. This is the space where they relax. If you put them in a small dining room with a few of their peers, they see others eating, they will also want to eat. So you, tapping into similar tapping into similar habits and similar necessities of people with dementia is what led to the final design outcome. um, Orientation and wayfinding is again very important. So, smaller scale of buildings help them to easily navigate them. So, the more that they can see, the more that they can navigate. Um, if we have a building that has a very long corridor and similar looking doors on either side, they're going to get very confused. They're not going to know which room is theirs. But if you have a smaller building and say that the building has turns at different points, they might be able to identify, oh, my room was right next to this turn, this must be my room. Or they might be able to identify, oh, my room was at the end of the corridor, so this must be my room. Simple decision points where they're able to stand and understand, okay, do I need to go left or right? Yes, left looks like where I'm supposed to be. Similarly, light and dark, light plays a huge role. Shadows again. um, Incorporating natural lighting helps them understand daytime, nighttime. It impacts their circadian rhythms, which are um, basically the bodily rhythms that are controlled by natural solar cycles. So, for example, a normal circadian rhythm would be waking up as the sun rises. So, you wake up when the sunshine falls on you, and you go to bed when the sun sets, when the sunlight has gone. Um, so using such lighting helps keep them oriented to day and night, and keeps their functions oriented similarly. um, Allowing a lot of daylight to enter during the day helps with these functions. So um, if you have a space which is very dark and dingy, they're going to think it's just nighttime and they're going to keep sleeping. If you have a space which is very bright, they're not going to understand that day has gotten over. Moreover, views of the nature must be utilized, because um, people with dementia report feeling more lively when they see plants, when they see animals, when they're able to have a view of the outside.
And I
Um,
think all of us also feel very happy when we look at plants and
yeah,
animals. So,
agreed. I don't think anyone wants to live in a space with small, tiny windows.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And color and contrast again play a huge role. So, for example, this is one of the buildings that has been designed for people with dementia by RDT architects. Now, because they have rooms on either side, it could be disorienting. But what they did is they've got different colors on each side. So, a different colored door helps them identify. All I need to remember is that the door to my room is blue. I can go and find that door anywhere now.
It's just like, our currency notes, which are different colors.
Exactly.
So somebody you cannot
Exactly.
read,
So,
somebody you cannot read, for them that's the idea. That okay,
yes, yes,
yeah, so same way. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Um, Moving on to the design processes from here. Um, so, so after understanding activities of daily living for people with dementia, I created a diagram to understand spatial relationships and their connections. So, for example, one would enter at the admin block, which hosts the reception and lobby. They would be directed to the recreation hub, the training and awareness center, or the daycare center. These are then connected to the medical center independently and from caregiver residence and guest residences. So, I would like to bring this up here. In my project, I refer to people with dementia or the patients as guests because this is elevating an experience for them and it's more than an institution.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So, again, as you can see, all of these functions are interlinked. So, the recreation hub is also approachable by the training and awareness center. Um, Moreover, the more public functions are connected directly to the admin block, which means that I would be entering the site and able to navigate to these functions and before getting to my private functions. So this creates a level of hierarchy as well in terms of public and privateness of spaces. Um, Moving on, for each of the functions, I created similar charts to identify all of the functions that I wanted to incorporate. This is just to give me an idea of all of the functions that I need and what connections I need between them at first glance. So when thoughts are flowing, I find that putting things into a bubble diagram is a great way of representing what your original initial thought process was. Um, so again, similarly for the medical center, for caregiver residences, for guest patients, having nursing stations, having storage.
A question here. So is there,
Yeah.
for example, for India has this Bureau of Indian Standards guidelines, and I remember seeing such a diagram for a hospital, like a 200 bedded hospital. Is there some existing standard like this in India for something like a respite center or for a palliative care center, as you're making for a dementia care center?
Yes. So I think I have, yes. So in terms of palliative care, the care team needs to be very efficient. So the number of beds is not exactly limited, similar as it is in a hospital. However, if one were designing more with the institutional aspect in mind, one would cater to the hospital bed concept. But it is a rule of thumb that palliative care designers follow, that the number of caregivers is equal to the number of residents, so the number of people that are being given care, times 2.5. So for each person that is receiving care, there needs to be 2.5 caregivers available to provide them care. This includes their primary caregiver, care all around the clock, so 24/7 they require care. Caregivers can be coming and going in shifts, but if I'm designing for 100 if I'm designing for 100 people with dementia, I need to provide 250 caregivers to take care of them. So the minimum number should be two. So if I'm giving for one person, there needs to be at least 2 to 3 caregivers. I took 2.5, which is the median average between the two. Um, and then in terms of the care team, there is going to be the back end staff as well, which is then taking care of the housekeeping, the garden functions, the kitchen staff. There's going to be drivers because um, you need an ambulance driver. There would be members of the team that are driving golf carts to get people to where they need to be similarly. And then there would be therapists and instructors in the medical center that are providing therapy to the people with dementia. There will be administrative staff and medical staff as well. So all of these form the members of the care team, and they need to be taken care of in terms of design too, whether they're going to be staying on site or off site. Um, so, for example, if the doctor that I have is staying off site, all I need to take care of is that he has a room to go relax in, so like a lounge or something. But I don't need to provide him a room to live in. But if I'm looking at caregivers, they will be living on site, so I need to provide them housing, um, which is again a great a good quality of housing, so that they don't feel burnt out while performing their role.
Got it.
Um, yes. So moving on, I decided how I wanted my area program to be. So split the functions into public, semi-public, and private. Um, Public includes the administration units. Semi-public includes the visitors lounge, recreation, all of those. So this includes spaces that are accessible from the residents side, as well as from people that are coming from outside. So the visitors, people who are receiving care at the daycare center, which would be 8 hours of care a day. Um, Clinics, therapy spaces where doctors are able to come from outside and guests go from inside. And then there would be private. So this would be the guest residences, the staff housing units, maintenance and housekeeping units. These are going to be limited. So limited people are going to be able to use these. This then split into a large table where each of the areas was determined. So in a thesis project, because the project is your own, you create your own area program, which was such a challenge when it came to the first time for me, because usually we have the professors just handing us the site and the area program, and until site study it was fine, but coming to create an area program was so much research went into this, because I needed to understand exactly how many spaces I needed, how much space I needed to provide for each bed. So I was referring to books where they described hospital bedding, where they described the the gap that needs to be between each bed, um, the sizes of washrooms, all of that, and then that went into creating the area program. And this area program got changed almost every time that I designed. So with each design iteration, there was a new area program, because something or the other was either too big or too small. Um,
So is there a standard for the area that is available in India or across the world that can be directly followed? Like, for example, there are these time saver standards. So is there something for
yeah.
dementia care that exists?
Not really, no. There isn't anything specific. So, in terms of providing the bed, the standard that I referred to was for hospital bedding,
Got it.
which states that you require, I think it's 12.5 or 13 square meters for a bed, with area to go around it. And in terms of corridors, NBC has a great way that they have corridors that are, say they're doubly loaded, and then for wheelchair access, how wide they need to be. Similarly, I used similar dimensions. So if I needed, the thing with creating rooms for dementia patients is that you need to be prepared for the worst case scenario, which means that a person might be needed to taken out on a stretcher. In case they've fallen, they can't get up, they won't be able to sit in a wheelchair. You would put them on a stretcher and take them out. Or if they're unconscious, how would you have them in a wheelchair? Again, they go out on a stretcher. So for people with dementia, I needed to create a room that was not only wheelchair accessible but also stretcher accessible. So that was one of the main criterion that went into going in designing it. So in AutoCAD, I remember I just had a stretcher module that I was taking through different places. That was I able to turn it at pivot at whatever points I needed. Was there enough room for me to put the stretcher and also have people on either side lifting the patient on? So there was a lot of back and forth that went into designing the spaces on either side of the bed as well.
So, as far as regulation is concerned, NBC bylaws are concerned, do these dementia care centers fall under the definition of a hospital or a nursing home? Can you tell me that?
They fall under nursing home, if I'm not wrong. So um yeah, they don't follow the regulations of
They
a
definitely
hospital to the
don't.
T. No,
They are not definitely not
no,
hotels.
they're not hotels. No.
So between a hotel and a hospital is a dementia care center, which is kind of a nursing home. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Currently, there were a lot of dementia care centers that I was looking for in the city that I could go and visit. And majority of the buildings that I had were similar to the building that I'm living in. So it's just one block that is in a residential complex, and the rooms are similar to normal bedrooms. There is no special provision for dementia patients. In some cases, the rooms had such small windows that the patients felt like they were in a prison, and if their family wouldn't come and visit them, that's what they feel like. So they feel isolated from the world, which is already a symptom that they're experiencing because of their illness.
Got
So
it.
they feel that people don't understand them, and then when they're isolated further, that just puts them in a darker mental space, which is something I did not want at all for my design. I needed them to be able to experience the outdoors just as much. um, Also, if you notice the sizes of the rooms that I've provided, the guest unit, for example, is for one person, one guest only, and it's 30 square meters,
Yeah,
which includes, um, which has a lot of space for the person to simply walk around. If they decide they want to walk around just in their room, they would be able to.
got it.
So this is a broad breakdown of the area. As you can see, the caregiver residences take a large portion because there's 250 caregivers for 100 guests, and the other functions, while important, take a smaller chunk of the area. So moving on to the design part
Yeah,
of it.
finally, the design part of it.
Yes.
Take us
uh,
directly from the concept and how all those things, right?
right. um, okay, so the vision for my project was to provide a homely experience with therapeutic spaces and a lot of sensory stimulation. um, Designing places which provided a feeling of community was important. So each patient would feel like they had family around them. They wouldn't feel isolated. They would feel like their peers understand what they're going through. A human centered design approach would then allow the residents to regulate their emotions and senses by themselves. Moreover, providing outdoor spaces such as healing gardens, something with senses, something which encourage them to pursue their senses further, lighter colors, soothing spaces, all of that was what I wanted to wanted to reflect in my design. Um, in Goa, we know that the vernacular architecture, when we think of Goa, we think of very bright, colorful buildings similar to I mean, that's what movies and everything have us seeing. When we go to Goa, we see buildings that are painted cyan, magenta, yellow. Um, while those are very helpful in orienting oneself and identifying, loud colors can actually be disruptive and be overly sensitive, stimulating to the senses. So I wanted something that would be lighter in terms of helping them distinguish by vision. Multi-sensory environments restore some of the sensory use, which is there are multiple research papers about this as well. And then designing places where and areas where people with dementia can experience their senses while in action help create like a safe environment where they're also feeling energized. So if they're able to interact with nature, they feel more lively, they feel energized. It's a safe environment because there is no way that they can wander out of the zone that I've created. um, the concept taps into the history, heritage, and culture of Goa. So there's lots of old buildings in Goa. An architecture fanatic would obviously want to visit. For example, there is the church, the Church of Bomb Jesus. Then there's Fort Aguada. There is so much Catholic Portuguese influence in Goa. There is Indian architecture, Mughal architecture. Um, there are so many religious backgrounds as well, including Jain, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu. There is so much in Goa that one can pick up in terms of architecture, and I wanted to reflect that in my design to have it gel in with the surroundings. So, um, having something like the architecture elements that I wanted to pick up was like the Portuguese, the window styles. Then, in terms of materiality, there is brick, there is plaster. Um, The ruins of the Church of St. Augustine show that there was so much brick usage in the time, and right now it's all covered up with colorful paint. And I wanted to design with materials that were more than just colors. So these are a few concept sketches that I created. I wanted to incorporate water within the site
That
as
looks
well.
so much like DK Ching. It's such good work. Yeah.
That's such a compliment. Yeah. So the lobby is where the guests would be dropped off, and um, the lobby is a good 350 meters away from where the beach itself is. So what I wanted to do was, when as soon as a person enters, they know that this is a site near the beach, but they I wanted them to feel that this is near the beach. So I wanted to have a water body, a smaller water body that sort of creates a foreshadowing effect that okay, this is small. There's a much larger body at the back. This is just the beginning. Um, Kind of symbolizing that this is the start of new things. Um, I wanted to have a drop off area which would then be accessible by the lobby, and then the water body could then be used to access other functions. For example, the area around it would be a shaded columnade, and then one could access the daycare, one would be able to access it from the lobby. The final design definitely is much different from what this initial sketch started off as. Moreover, physical barriers in space are very important when it comes to people with dementia. If they so much as feel something obstructing their movement at calf level, they will turn around. So, having lower height barriers can create seating spaces. Having something that's mid height can create zones which they cannot cross, but they can see across. And then higher height means that it's a boundary wall, which means that this is where you stop. So, physical barriers again then help create help with their wayfinding and orientation. They know when to turn away, when they can keep proceeding. So, in terms of the organizational layout, this is one of the initial concept sketches I had where each of these rectangular blocks shows a cluster of care home units, and the crosshatch space in between shows green spaces. So, the idea that I wanted was to intersperse spaces with green spaces in between. So, each residence would have a unique point. So, for example, this one has a junction which on one side there's a tree, on one side there's a green patch. Here there is just a tree and an open area. Similarly, here there is trees on either side. So each cluster would have something unique to it. There would be different angles which create decision points which help with wayfinding and orientation for people with dementia. Um, Moving on to the design evolution. Uh, yeah. So obviously, design is not a straightforward process. There's a lot of back and forth from the get go. So this is a few zoning iterations that I started off with, where I created a legend. So for example, initially the admin block was to the side with services, and then the entry was into a very nice open space where one could see all of the different functions. Um, Later on, it moved to even further to the side where one would enter and just be greeted by the daycare center, the public functions itself, and everything else is open. And then slowly the admin block came to the front end center. So it became a entry point for people on the site. And this was one of the sketches that I had. This was developing option three. So one would enter into the site. They would be greeted by the admin and drop off. Um, Training and awareness was a function that was primarily public, so it would be towards the outside. And then all of the buildings are split into separate clusters. So this shows the units that I wanted. So each unit cluster would have two units and be placed separately, creating different zones. So, for example, there's a little circle here. Um, there is a sort of zigzag space here. There is a little entryway here. Um, each cluster would have a different experience. Eventually, I realized that this was not cohesive at all. It created a lot of problems for me in terms of designing the roof because the roofs were clashing with each other. So that led to the first iteration where I tried to combine different clusters to create slightly larger ones. But again, the buildings seem, yeah.
So which software have you used for this for our viewers?
Um, SketchUp primarily,
Mm-hmm.
and AutoCAD to help design the spaces.
Okay, thank you. Go on.
Yeah, and this particular render has been via Photoshop.
Great.
Um, so the way that these buildings are placed creates a village-like community settlement. But similar to the Indian villages, this is quite scattered, which is not what I wanted. It's still supposed to feel cohesive while reflecting a community. Um, which is one of the cons of this design, that the buildings are too segregated, which made designing cores for them very difficult. Because at the end of the day, they're still old people, they still require an elevator.
Some
And in
people
case of
some people may just call this organic.
organic, yes.
Yeah. Anyways, you're talking about
Yeah.
elevators. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of elevators, in case there is a stretcher emergency, I would need to provide an elevator which is fit for a stretcher. And in so many blocks, providing so many elevators would just be a waste of space and time and money. So, that led to the next iteration, where I combined multiple different units to create so many different clusters. However, the cores in this were slightly better resolved. I was able to provide access to cores on either side. So, in case there was an emergency, the elevators were accessible, the stairs were accessible. Um, but at first glance, it looked like I had snakes lying on my site, which is not something I was going for. It seemed very absurd to me, um, and the building typologies just didn't line up with each other. That led to the third design iteration, which had a combined cluster for the public function. Coming in, there would be the recreation and daycare block, and then lots of different units for the housing. Um, the water body here just seems excessive because this is still close to the sea. And while I did want to show that there were a gradation in approaching the larger body of water, this seems a bit excessive. And realistically thinking, it might be difficult to manage as well. Um, the housekeeping staff would be working throughout the week just trying to keep it clean, given the windiness and the raininess of Goa. Um, and then that led to the fourth iteration, which was much better resolved, which had me anchor the viewpoints of the buildings towards the sea. So while I cannot actually see the sea from here, I still have a body of water close to me, which allows me to feel closer to nature. There's similarly over here, while these don't directly look into the sea, I still have the body of water around me to stimulate my senses. Um, Moreover, providing each of these an anchor point allows for um, allows them to there to be some better viewpoints, better anchoring, better orientation in on the site itself. Moreover, as you can see, the pathways align very nicely. I can create really simple looping pathways, which one person could start here and they would end up here, say, but they can always return to the same point. So each pathway is linked to the other, so that in case the person wanders off, they're always able to return to the same starting point. Um, this was just a block model that I had created. So the base of the model is MDF, and the buildings on top are used um, foam board, I think it's called. Yeah. So again, because the height limit was so little, the buildings seem so small on site.
Got it.
Yeah. And I had started to develop the SketchUp model for this as well. So, for example, you can see here there's trees, the buildings are there, there's a little bit of the materiality shown. So, the orangish color shows brick, the white color shows, the grayish color shows concrete, and then the white color shows plaster.
So what's this model, if you can go back, what's this model
Yeah.
made up of?
This one?
Yeah, the how did you make those contour lines and how did you get them cut for our viewers?
All right. So for this model, I picked up the survey map of our site, of my site on AutoCAD, and I created a laser cutting file for it. So for doing that, each of the contours was split. So each contour would have its own boundary, which would create one layer of the model. So for example, this was one layer, this layer was smaller and it went over it, so it was on another sheet. Similarly, I created sheets for each of the layers, and then once they were cut together, they were stuck together using Fevibond, and then that created this final outcome of all the layers on the model.
So is it so how much does all this cost for our viewers if you want to get things laser cut for a model like this? You can give us
Right.
an idea.
So usually people that do the laser cutting have the MDF sheets on board, and they quote different prices for what they charge for the thickness of MDF sheet. But this was I think this was 2 MDF, and it cost me 2,700 rupees to 3,000 rupees to get this laser cut and glued on.
For it. And
And
can some student do it by hand? I know it's going to take a lot of time, but is it possible to do this thing manually?
so, cutting MDF manually, while possible, is a very difficult task, which would take a lot of elbow grease and a lot of time. Um, it is possible to draw on MDF. It is possible to cut through it with scissors, but it's not going to be very clean. I do recommend using a different material if one were to be cutting by hand. So
Like
maybe using
thermocol.
ethyl board,
Okay.
maybe using foam board for it because
Forward.
it's cut. You can cut through it with scissors.
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is the final design out of the four.
This was the final iteration out of the four, and then I think this is what I submitted for my pre-final, if I'm not wrong. And then after that, I still felt like there was more that could be done. So as you can see, I still have cons listed here,
Got it.
and then I improved on those
Brilliant.
in the final design iteration that I presented to the jury.
Great.
Yeah. So this is just the cover illustration. I was trying my hand at creating a collage from one of these styrofoam renders that I pulled off of Enscape.
Brilliant. This is beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so this is just the overview of the site. It's in white because I needed the text to take the highlight here.
Sure.
Um, After my jury, this chapter was compiled, which has my design portfolio and the learnings and outcomes from all of my research, all of my previous design outcomes, and site studies. So, iteration 4 has been the primary source for this design, where public functions are clustered, highlighted, units are grouped together. There is the zoning, the hierarchy of it was working really well. So, that was the learning that I pulled from that design for the final outcome. Um, this was the broad zoning of it. I'm sorry, the image seems a little blurred, but
Mm-hmm.
as you can see here, the purple buildings highlight the public front. The darker blue color is for the water bodies, which are split into smaller ones, and essentially they function as little ponds where fish can be grown, fish can be kept. So um, there is an entry pavilion which has another water body in it, which acts as the central access point to the site. So you get dropped off at your lobby and then you walk in. And from this point is where you have the largest field of vision. So you can see the buildings, you can see the different water bodies, and you can see all the way down. The recreation hub has been clustered into one building, but as you can see, there are the building itself seems to be divided into four separate parts. This was done on purpose to give the visual of having different functions. So each function has a separate zone within the same building, and one can tell that at first glance. Um, so the units for the people with dementia have been split into two types. One is just for people with dementia, which is the mild starting stages or the milder moderate stages. And then there are units where the guest requires a carer to stay with them. These are for the severe cases or for cases which are not which cannot be left alone. So they would require 24 hours of care, 7 hours a week. Um, these have then been interspersed. So if you can see towards the left, we have the guest unit, and towards the right are the caregiver only. Now, it was important to me that the carers be able to access the guest unit in the middle of the night if necessary in case of an emergency, which is why some guest units have been provided here. Some of them have been provided closer here, and the pathways directly lead up to the guest units.
Where are the patients, the guests staying? The
These,
okay, okay,
the
okay,
pink
okay,
and
okay.
yellow units,
Pink and
yes.
yellow. Okay, okay, okay. But I got
Yeah,
confused with the guests or the visitors. So sorry. You told me that guests are the
yes.
patients.
Guests are the patients,
Got
yes.
it. And if
This
there
is
are,
again.
if they're guests of the guests, where do they stay?
So if they're guests of the guests, they would either get a guest plus carer unit because the visitor, a
Okay.
guest of a guest would probably be their family member.
Yeah, family member. Yes.
Um, yes, so they would get the room where they have a caregiver present.
Got it.
But the thing with most dementia care facilities is that they don't allow guests to stay very long because then the patient is not able to regulate themselves back to their environment.
Got it.
Um, which is why a lot of the times if it's a severe case of dementia and the person has very difficultly gelled in with their surroundings, the people, their visitors, are only instructed to watch. They're not allowed to participate in any activities with them. They're not allowed to provide care in terms of helping them get dressed or anything. Their day-to-day functions go on as normal. The visitor is only able to spectate or interact if the time permits. um, so that is also something that needed to be taken care of, which is why I have consciously not provided any visitor rooms or guest rooms for guest of guests.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Um, so this was the roof plan, and the blue highlights areas of the roof where solar panels can be provided. Um, this is a small calculation that I've done using the PV Watts website, where you just need to input your roof area and direction of sun of the direction of the roof and your location, and it calculates how many kilowatts per hour can be generated in a year. Goa has an excellent area for solar panels, for photovoltaic systems to be set up, and they encourage their residents to do so as well by providing subsidies. So if you have a solar panel system set up for your house, for example, they would provide you a subsidy on your bill, as well as the fact if you're able to return some energy back to grid, they give you money for it. So they're encouraging it wholeheartedly, which is a great idea. And I wanted to incorporate that system even in my site.
Got it. What is it called? Net metering or something?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a specific website for
Website.
where
Got it.
they've got resources regarding that too.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. Um, so here's just a view from the water pavilion, which is this building right here. So
Got
it's
it.
surrounded by water and it creates a small platform which is connected by 4 bridges.
Right.
And then this leads out further into the site. And then these are just two side sections that have been cut through the um, lateral and the longitudinal side.
Got it.
You enter in through Arrowson Beach Road, which leads you down to the drop off zone and the parking. Um, I have consciously not provided basement parking because the site is such that the soil is so compromised that providing a basement is basically just ripping away the entire natural foundation of the earth around me.
Right.
If I'm not wrong, they don't permit you to construct a basement either in this zone, at
Got it.
least until 500 meters till high tide line. So,
And I can imagine that it's going to be very, very watery.
exactly, yes.
It's going to be
It's
very
very sandy, very watery.
watery.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So even the services have been left to be above ground. So
Yeah.
the site, the straight way goes down to the drop off, and then there is a detour to get to the services, which is this building here, connected to the recreation block, which is where the main cafeteria lies. Um, in terms of the parking, there are 10 bays that have been provided for disabled people with disabilities, with ample space on either side so that the door can be open, they can be lifted into wheelchairs or stretchers and taken into the building accordingly. Moreover, when you come down this way, there is a zone for an ambulance parking and an ambulance bay towards the medical center, So the reason this has been designed like this is because the ambulance would come down, they would back into the spot, stretcher would be loaded, and then they would be able to drive off immediately. So this is simply for the sake of efficiency that
Got
this
it.
zone has been provided like that.
Got it.
Um, yeah. So as you can see for each of these buildings, I will pull up a blow up plan later. But for each of these buildings, there is a corridor towards the inner side, which again allows them to still interact with the natural element on that side, but the view for each room is towards the sea. So this is the public block here. The drop off leads to the reception, which is then connected by admin functions, and of course, a toilet block, which is very important to have. I think in my first iteration, I forgot to put a toilet block, and somehow my professor missed that. I saw it and I was appalled at the mistake I made. How did I just present a building without a toilet? I was horrified. But yes, toilets are very important, especially you need to figure them out in the beginning, or else that's going to completely flip your design over. Um, it's best to provide what I've learned throughout these 5 years is that it's best to provide a toilet in an area where you can't get a view at all. So instead of compromising an area where you can get a view, even if it's of one tree, it's better to put the toilet in an area where you can't see anything at all.
What about
Um,
orientation? Have you thought about that toilets can be best put in, for example, the eastern or the western place, side of the building where it's going to be heated up, so the toilet becomes a buffer zone for you rather than it being,
yeah, exactly. Because then the ventilation, the vents on the toilet are so small. I mean, how much is it really going to get heated up? Plus,
yeah,
your actual functions, the ones that you sit in, don't get
yeah,
that
yeah, because in
warm.
the toilet you're spending 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and if you have
Yeah,
constipation, maybe 30 minutes, but but definitely not more than that, right? But
yeah,
in your other space, like a bedroom or a like a living room, you're spending more time.
yeah, exactly. It is definitely very important to consider orientation as well.
Yeah,
So toilets, I've seen that people generally forget about toilet blocks or services until the very last minute, and then they just put it wherever they find space.
got it,
um I remember one of my friends drew a toilet that was looking into the nurses lounge, and the nurses lounge was then directly connected to, I think, a bunch of hospital beds. So essentially, when the door of the toilet was open, the entire hospital could smell the toilet.
got
So
it.
yeah.
Gone, yeah,
um, so another thing that I picked up from Goan architecture was providing patios and porches. So they have a buffer zone that is a covered outdoor space before you enter into the actual space. So for example, when you get dropped off to the porch and then you enter the reception, which then leads you again to another shaded porch and then the water pavilion. And similarly for each of the buildings, there is a shaded porch that you step into before stepping into the building, which creates a transition zone, which I think helps with orientation a bit more, because once you're in that zone and then you know that okay, this was outdoors, now I'm going inside a building. So for people with dementia, it's a very straightforward way of telling them, okay, you've stepped onto this. When you go, when you continue to go forward, you're going inside, because now it's covered and now look, there's walls around you. So you're in a safe space, you're protected. Um, for the cafeteria, I decided to provide one that would seat 100 people at a time. Um, the reason for this was that although I have 350 people on site, including the guests and the caregivers, each person would be eating in shifts. So having 350 people in one room at a time would simply create loud noises, chaos. Um, Having 100 people would allow regulation of sounds, of smells, of people. Plus it would help different groups of people to be formed where each person can have a different schedule. So daily activities proceed according to a schedule. One person could eat, say, from 12:30 to 1:30, another person could be eating from 1:30 to 2:30, and then that creates a consistent peer group as well for the people. So this was a very conscious decision that I decided to provide the seating with less members than there actually are. Um, Moreover, each of the recreational functions as well as the daycare center are all lesser in capacity so that peer groups can be formed and each person can interact with different activities on a different day. Say, for example, if I'm living on site, I go to the recreation hub. One day I am going to the library, I am reading books there. Then I go out to the cafeteria, I have my lunch, and then I proceed to go to the creative studio to do some arts and crafts. The next day, my same group might be doing yoga in the morning, then going to lunch, then um, going to the exercise studio for some light workout, and then spending the day on the beach. So, similarly, different routines, different schedules can be set, and it prevents overcrowding of the space and hence overstimulation of the space. Um, this is the first floor plan of the same building. Um, So the recreation hub also has a small spa and meditation block at the very top. Um, they can the members can come, they can receive massages, they can enjoy a nice spa experience as well because we're providing hospitality apart from home-like environment and care of an institute. So these are just some sections and elevations that show different materials too. So this elevation is of the daycare center, the medical center, and the lobby. If you can see, the railings have been ornamented. So modern railings, especially those with glass, tend to disorient people because you can see through them. It doesn't look like a barrier, even if it might be. However, having these thick cone style ornamental railings would help them understand and see very clearly that this is something that is stopping me. This is a railing. I can go up till here, I can't go beyond this point. So the same with sections and elevations. I just use them to depict different spaces. This is for the guest units and the carer units. So each unit has its own personal nook, which is shaded, but it creates a balcony experience where they're able to retreat to by themselves. So apart from the communal spaces where they're able to sit in the shade and enjoy company of their members, even if it's 4 or 5 people, they do want a space to retreat to at the end of the day or maybe in the beginning to start their mornings off. Um, and creating a private space that only they can access is a way that I have achieved that. So this balcony also allows me to create more openings that allow for maximum daylight in the morning, in the daytime, to enter the space.
Got it.
Um, yeah, these are the caregiver units. They're all the units. I have done three typologies. These are the three typologies of units. So the guest unit, the guest plus caregiver with 2 beds, and the carer unit.
What software
Um,
has been used to make this?
SketchUp throughout. So
Okay.
I have used SketchUp to do all of my 3D modeling. I have used AutoCAD to do all of the 2D drawings. And I have used Enscape to acquire the visual renders. So these, for example.
That's a plugin that's available for SketchUp.
Yes, that is a plugin available for SketchUp.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes. And then I have used Photoshop and InDesign to compose all of the graphics and the pages.
Got it.
Yeah. So, for the guest unit, for example, if I was standing right in the middle here, I would be able to see all four of the functions that I have provided from one spot. So, um, my professor asked me why I didn't provide a regular rectangular room like they have in hotels. And I said because that would hinder my identification of different spots. I wouldn't be able to create different zones without creating physical barriers. So, for example, I enter into a space which is like a transition to the actual sleeping zone. So, I have a couch there, I can sit there, there is storage there. But when I'm standing in the middle, I can see my sleeping zone, my balcony, my bathroom, and the exit all at once, which then allows a sense of comfort as well because I know where everything is situated and everything is different. Um,
Got it.
so I've shown that in a 3D diagram here. For example, there's a person there. Each of the zones is easily identifiable. There is no television provided in any of the rooms, which is done on purpose. So, in interaction with architect Sanjeev Kumar, he said that providing any form of reflective surface, even a television, would cause problems. To start with, they never watched television much because they wanted to interact with their peers all the time, or they wanted to spend time outside, because that's not how their childhood was. Television was introduced to these people when they were, say, in their middle age, or maybe they were like older, old age, and they never gained that fondness for watching TV as the youngsters of this generation did. Plus, having a reflective screen disorients them further. So, a lot of people with dementia don't recognize themselves when they see themselves in a mirror or on a television screen. And Sir reported that at NEMA, they once had a case where people would try to punch through the mirror, which caused injury, which caused damage as well. So, in order to prevent all of that, no televisions, no mirrors, no reflective surfaces have been provided in any of the spaces.
Got it.
Um, yeah. As you can see, the bathroom is accessible by wheelchair, and there is a small space to park the wheelchair as well, while one can sit and take a shower or sit and use the restroom. Um, there is ample storage for clothing because, in case of a long term stay, they might be bringing clothes that are for different types of seasons. Say they have clothes that are for rainy or colder seasons, summer clothes are different, etc. Um, Again, this is for the guest and carer. There are two separate beds. They have clear access to the door, the washroom, and outside. And for the carer unit, there is a added level of privacy where one enters into a common space and then they enter to their actual bedroom space. So it creates a sort of studio feeling where this area can be used as a mini pantry with a mini bar, a small kettle, stuff like that.
Got it.
Um, so, yes. And this was just an explored axonometric diagram of the public building where all of the parts of the building have been shown. So, for example, different materials, the railings, the chhajjas that have been created to go over the windows underneath, shaded porch, timber columns, um, all of those.
Got it.
This was the physical model that I had created. The base is using MDF. The blocks themselves have been laser cut using box board. These can be cut by hand as well using full cuts and half cuts, even the roofs. But I preferred getting them laser cut because I didn't have that much faith in myself for cutting all of these boxes cleanly.
Hmm.
Um, the trees are small nails with thermocol balls covered in green sawdust on top. And for the palm trees, I basically just used a small artificial plant with similar looking branches. This was a part model. So this is the public block, this is the recreation, and this is the daycare. So this was 1:200 scale. Um, and these are just the more pictures of the model. So as you can see in the 1:500 scale model, all I'm trying to show is the floor plates and the roof forms, just to get an idea of what the building blocks looks like. And then in the 1:200 scale model, the openings have been outlined um, more clearer, along with the different materials as well.
You also taken a photo of the interior, which is so beautiful. Looks like a real photo.
Yeah. So this was from the daycare center, which is this building right here. And
Right.
in this picture, I just wanted to show that once you entered, you could see that there was a larger space in the middle.
Got it.
Um, yeah. And this is just some views from the 3D model. So the roof form, the railings, this is what the sit out would look like. This is just a path going along the water feature. And all of these views are from Enscape. Yeah,
Great,
that's
great.
about it.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much, Arushi. It's amazing, and we're gonna also show your walkthrough, which you're gonna share with us, and we're gonna.
I My laptop actually crashed before I could create a proper walkthrough, so I don't have a video
No
walkthrough.
problem, no problem. So great.
Yeah.
So it was amazing, and what is to be appreciated is the 4-step iteration, which is actually a 5-step iteration that you did. So you looked at the pros and cons of the first, improved upon them, looked at the second, third, fourth, and even after the final, I'm pretty sure you came up with ideas, and then
Yeah,
you
even
have
right
to
now when I'm explaining, I can still think of better ways to implement it. And I think 5 iterations was what I put here, but in reality, it was more like 10 because
10.
every studio class, there was something or the other that could have been improved. And then I would improve that and take that, and then the iteration would get flipped over. So there was something new, and then I would improve that, and then again, there's a new one. So yeah.
So the beauty lies in improving and evolving design, and then also to document that as you have done, so
Yeah.
that it shows the process. And the beauty lies in the process is something I
Yes.
think you would agree upon,
Yes.
because
Yes.
the learning of design, because it's not a simple solution or it's like a straightforward solution. It lies in how you have gone through the various aspects, evolved through the various inputs that you've got, and also incorporated things which, as a designer, you earlier could not think of.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's the step is where the prize lies, and you
Yeah.
have done that very well. So we are very, very grateful to you. Would you like to say something else, for people who are in their theses, as to what can be their source of inspiration? What are the steps that they need to follow, or some tips that you can give them?
Sure. So, while choosing a thesis project, always think of what is truly what your passion is. If you choose something that is some that you just pick for the sake of doing, or something that you feel like might fetch you more marks, it is never going to do what you want it to do. Always pick something for your thesis, for your dissertation, which you believe in, which you feel you can do justice to, even if it takes the extra hard work. um, Doing your research efficiently is honestly the best way of going about it. So even if your professor asks you why you did something, or if they ask you to change something because that's what conventionally happens, but your research tells you otherwise, you are able to back up your idea, your claim, with something that is substantial. So essentially, start your research by just introspecting, think about what you feel is important, conceptualize that to propose the project, and choose a site that would do justice to it. It doesn't matter if the site has a slope. It doesn't matter if the site is jagged, if it's linear. If you feel like your project would do good here, do the hard work for it. It will pay off, definitely.
Brilliant. And are there people you want to acknowledge, like your guide, like your college, or other people right here, so that they're part of the record? You can do it right now.
Yeah. I would like to acknowledge all of the effort that my guides, Professor Jayakumar and Professor Anupam Bansal, put in. They definitely gave me very helpful ideas. And outside of college, my friends, of course, who gave a lot of support throughout, who encouraged me to do better. And outside of college, I had um, architect Karthik Sharma, who was a huge support system and inspiration, and Abhishek Bhattacharjee, who was a pillar of support, and of course, my family, without who I would not have been able to make it.
Also, probably you would like to thank School of Planning and Architecture.
Yes, School of Planning and Architecture, for all the 5 years that I've learned and put through, all of the previous professors as well, because I mean, while doing this project, I could think of things that they told me that they would, that I would remember while designing, and yeah, a
Yeah, great.
wholesome experience all
Thank you.
over.
Thank you very much, Arushi. So that was Arushi who started talking about her very excellent thesis design on Dementia Care and Respite Center, sited in Goa, India. And she's taken us through the process, the evolution of design, and she's told us all the intricate details that went in, the research that went in, and all the case studies that she did, and then all the hard work in preparing so many models. So thank you so much. And I would like to say that this is exclusive for the Built channel, and the Built channel is a educational channel only. It's only for the public interest. The Built is a non-monetized channel, and we dedicate ourselves to remain non-monetized and always be available for educational and public interest purposes. And why don't you just tell everybody to subscribe for the build?
Like, share, and subscribe to the Built for more educational content. And thank you so much for having me here, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So that was Arushi, and that's the build. Thank you so much.
Thank you.